An arrogant waiter thought he knew exactly who belonged in my high-end restaurant, treating my guest with sneering contempt. What he didn't know was he was insulting a culinary legend, and the very man who owned the place. The soft glow of the Edison bulbs reflected in the polished mahogany of the bar, casting a warm, amber light across the dining room. It was a sight that never failed to fill me with a deep, swelling pride. This was Arya, my restaurant, my dream, built from scratch with sweat, debt, and a belief that good food and impeccable service could create something truly special. Tonight, however, I wasn't the owner. I was just Mark, a regular guy in a simple button-down shirt and jeans, treating my mentor to a well-deserved dinner. Across the table from me sat Arthur, a man whose gentle smile and slightly stooped shoulders belied the titan he'd once been in the culinary world. He was the one who gave me my first shot as a line cook, who saw a spark in me and fanned it into a flame. He'd mortgaged his own home to help me secure the loan for this very building. Now, in his late 70s, he was retired, his hands gnarled with arthritis, his wardrobe consisting of comfortable cardigans and soft-soled shoes. To me, he was royalty. To the world, he just looked like a sweet old man. We were seated at a quiet corner table, and for the first 10 minutes everything was perfect. The hostess was gracious, the water was poured promptly, and the low hum of happy diners filled the air. I was just telling Arthur how much his early guidance meant to me when our waiter approached. He was tall, with sharp features and hair so perfectly coiffed it looked like a helmet. A small gold name tag on his pristine black vest read, Julian. He glided to our table with an air of theatrical importance, his eyes flicking over my casual attire and then lingering, for just a moment too long, on Arthur's well-worn but clean tweed jacket. A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk played on his lips. "Good evening, gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth but carrying an undertone of condescension. "May I start you with some of our Vesuvio sparkling mineral water, bottled at the source?" "Oh, tap water is just fine for me, thank you," Arthur said, with his characteristic warmth. Julian's smile tightened. "Of course. And for you, sir?" he asked, looking at me. "Tap water is great for both of us," I confirmed, keeping my tone light. He gave a curt nod, as if we'd just failed some unspoken test. "Very well, your menus." He didn't hand them to us so much as present them, holding them by the corners with his fingertips, as if they were delicate artifacts and we were grubby children. When he returned with the water, Arthur, who had been squinting at the menu, looked up. "Young man," he started kindly, "this all looks wonderful. My eyes aren't what they used to be. What would you recommend between the pan-seared scallops and the duck confit?" Julian sighed. A quiet, put-upon puff of air. "Well, sir," he began, his tone shifting into that of a lecturer addressing a particularly slow student, "the scallops are served with a saffron risotto and a basil foam reduction. It's a very delicate, nuanced dish. The duck confit is richer, more rustic." He said the word rustic like it was a contagion. "It depends on whether your palate is calibrated for subtlety or for simplicity." I felt a muscle in my jaw tighten. The man was a walking thesaurus of snobbery. Arthur, bless his heart, didn't seem to notice the insult. "Oh, the duck sounds lovely then. I've always been a simple man," he chuckled. I decided on the steak and Julian scribbled on his notepad. "And for wine?" he asked, his gaze fixed on me, clearly dismissing Arthur as a lost cause. "Arthur, what would you like?" I asked, pointedly turning to my guest of honor. "Oh, just a glass of the house red for me, please, Mark. Nothing fancy." "Ah." Julian actually flinched. It was a small, involuntary movement, but I saw it. "Sir," he said, his voice dripping with strained patience, "Arya does not have a house red. We have a curated wine list. Perhaps a nice Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa. Or, if you're feeling adventurous, a beautiful Malbec from Argentina that has notes of plum, tobacco, and a hint of leather on the finish." "The first one sounds fine," Arthur said, a little flustered now. The easy warmth was starting to fade from his eyes. "The Cabernet it is," Julian said, before turning on his heel and gliding away. I leaned forward. "Arthur, I am so sorry. This guy is a piece of work. I can ask for another waiter." Arthur waved a dismissive hand, though I could see the encounter had unsettled him. "No, no, Mark. It's fine. It's a fancy place. He's just doing his job, I suppose." But he wasn't just doing his job. He was making my most important guest feel small. And he was doing it in my restaurant. The rest of the meal was punctuated by Julian's microaggressions. He'd place my plate down with a flourish and Arthur's with a dull thud. He'd refill my water glass, but forget Arthur's. Each act was a small paper cut, designed to remind us that, in his eyes, we didn't belong. The final straw came with the dessert menu. Arthur, trying to be friendly and find some common ground, said, "You know, I spent over 40 years in this business myself. Started as a dishwasher. It's amazing to see how much things have changed." Julian stopped, placing the leather-bound menus on the table with a soft click. He looked down his nose at Arthur, a smug, pitying smile spreading across his face. "Indeed, it has," he said, his voice low and cutting. "We've elevated the experience. We cater to a more discerning clientele now. People who appreciate the finer things, not just a full stomach." He paused, letting the insult hang in the air like poison. But I'm sure it was very quaint back then. That was it. I saw the light in Arthur's eyes completely extinguish. He slumped back in his chair, his face a mixture of confusion and hurt. He looked old, and my blood turned to ice. All the warmth I felt for my restaurant, for the perfect lighting and the happy diners, evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, quiet rage. Julian saw the look on my face and mistook it for intimidation. He smirked again, confident in his power. He thought he was the gatekeeper of this little kingdom. He had no idea he was talking to the king. I slowly, deliberately, folded my linen napkin and placed it on the table beside my plate. I looked at Arthur's fallen face, then back at the preening waiter who was already turning to leave. My voice came out low and steady, cutting through the ambient noise of the dining room. "Julian." He stopped and turned back, an annoyed expression on his face. "Yes?" I met his gaze, and for the first time that evening, I let him see the authority I had been hiding. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "I have a question for you," I said, the calm in my voice more menacing than any shout. "And I want you to think very carefully before you answer. What is the most important rule at Aria?" A flicker of confusion, then annoyance, crossed Julian's face. He clearly expected me to complain about the food or the service, not to quiz him on company policy. He drew himself up to his full height, attempting to regain control of the conversation through sheer posture. "The most important rule, sir," he said, the word "sir," now laced with sarcasm, "is to provide an unparalleled fine dining experience through culinary excellence and anticipatory service." He recited the line as if reading it from a training manual, a hollow corporate slogan that meant nothing. He looked proud of himself, as if he'd just aced a pop quiz. "Wrong," I said, my voice still quiet. The calm was unnerving him. I could see it in the slight tremor in his hand. "That's the mission statement on the website. I asked for the rule. The real one. The one I drill into every single person who works here, from the general manager to the busboys." Julian's sneer returned. "I don't know what you're talking about. Look, if you have a complaint, I can get my manager." "The rule," I cut him off, my eyes locked on his, "is that the person washing the dishes in the back is just as important as the person paying $1,000 for a bottle of wine at the front. The rule is that this restaurant, this building, these tables, they are nothing without people. And every single person who walks through that door, regardless of whether they're wearing a tailored suit or a tweed jacket, is to be treated with the utmost dignity and respect. Not because it's good for business, but because it's the right thing to do. That is the only rule that matters here." My gaze flicked to Arthur, who was looking down at his hands, his shoulders still slumped. "This man," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't hide, "forgot more about food and hospitality before you were born than you will ever know. He built his life on the principle of making people feel welcome. He taught me that principle, and you have spent the last hour making him feel like he is less than nothing. In my restaurant," Julian actually scoffed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Your restaurant? That's a good one. Sir, I think you've had enough wine for the evening. You and your friend are clearly out of your element here. Aria is for people who understand what we're doing. It's not a soup kitchen. The insult was so blatant, so vile, that it sucked the air out of me for a second. Arthur finally looked up, a pained expression on his face. "Mark, please," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "Let's just go. It doesn't matter." "It matters to me, Arthur," I said, not taking my eyes off Julian. The rage was a physical thing now, a hot pressure behind my eyes. I felt a strange, chilling clarity. "You know," I said to Julian, "I was going to do this quietly. Just take you aside after my meal. But you've earned an audience." He rolled his eyes dramatically. "Are you finished with your little speech? Because I have other paying customers to attend to. People who actually belong here." He started to turn away. "Get your manager," I ordered. The command in my voice was absolute. It stopped him dead in his tracks. "Get Sarah. Tell her there's an issue at table 12 that requires her immediate attention." The use of her name made him pause. A tiny seed of doubt was planted in his arrogant mind. He searched my face, looking for a sign that I was bluffing. He found none. For a moment I thought he might refuse, but the cold certainty in my stare must have finally broken through his wall of smugness. With a final contemptuous look, he spun on his heel and strode towards the front of the house. I watched him go, a grim satisfaction settling over me. Arthur put a hand on my arm. "Son, this isn't necessary. He's just a young man with a bad attitude." "He's a bully, Arthur. And he did this in our house," I corrected him gently. "This is necessary." A minute later I saw them approaching. Julian was walking a half step behind Sarah, my general manager, a brilliant woman I had hired away from a 2-star Michelin restaurant. He was whispering in her ear, no doubt painting a picture of a belligerent, possibly drunk customer causing a scene. Sarah's face was set in a mask of professional concern, ready to smooth things over, to offer a free dessert or a complimentary glass of wine to placate the difficult guest. She approached the table, her eyes initially on the spot between Arthur and me, ready to deliver her well-rehearsed de-escalation speech. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Sarah. I'm the general manager. I understand there's been some—" Her voice trailed off as her eyes finally focused on my face. The professional mask didn't just crack, it shattered. Her jaw went slack. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking pale and shocked under the warm restaurant lighting. Julian, standing beside her with a triumphant smirk, didn't understand. He was expecting her to reprimand me, to put me in my place and vindicate him. But Sarah didn't look at him. She didn't look at Arthur. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. "Mr. Davies," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I had no idea you were dining with us tonight. What's wrong?" The smirk on Julian's face curdled into a mask of pure confusion. He looked from Sarah's terrified expression to my calm one, his brain struggling to process the impossible equation. He had seen me as a nobody, a piece of furniture in a world he commanded. The name Mr. Davies meant nothing to him, but Sarah's reaction was undeniable. The power dynamic at the table had just shifted with the force of an earthquake, and he was standing directly on the fault line. "Sarah," I said, my voice even but carrying an unmistakable edge of disappointment. "Please have a seat." I gestured to the empty chair beside me. She looked like she might faint. She shook her head slightly, remaining standing, a soldier at attention before a commanding officer. "What's going on?" Julian demanded, his voice a little too loud. "Sarah, this man has been disruptive and was just about to be asked to leave." I held up a hand, and he fell silent. All his bluster was gone, replaced by a nervous uncertainty. "Sarah," I began again, keeping my gaze on her. "I came here tonight for one reason, to give this man," I gestured to Arthur, "a beautiful meal. A meal to thank him for everything he's ever done for me. Do you know who this is?" Sarah glanced at Arthur, who was now watching the exchange with a bewildered sadness. I'm sorry, sir. I don't," she admitted. "This is Arthur Gable. He was the executive chef at the Grand Hotel for 25 years. He won the culinary world's highest honors. He was my first boss. He's the man who co-signed the loan that allowed me to buy this building and open this restaurant. Without him, Sarah, there is no Aria. There is no job for you, or for me, or for—" I let my eyes drift over to Julian. "Him." The color drained completely from Julian's face. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. He stared at Arthur, at his simple cardigan and kind, wrinkled face, and the scale of his misjudgment began to dawn on him. He hadn't just insulted a customer. He had desecrated a monument. "And your waiter, Julian," I continued, my voice dropping lower, colder, "spent the entire evening treating this culinary legend like he was something Julian had scraped off his shoe. He sneered at his request for tap water. He condescended to him about the menu. He mocked his choice of wine. And his grand finale was to suggest that Mr. Gable was too simple, too unsophisticated to appreciate what we do here, to imply that he didn't belong." Sarah's eyes, wide with horror, darted to Julian. "Is this true?" she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. Julian opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked trapped, a deer in the headlights of a car he hadn't seen coming. He looked at me, then at Sarah, then at Arthur, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. He had built his entire world on a foundation of perceived status and superficial judgment, and that foundation was now crumbling into dust beneath his feet. I was just trying to maintain the standards of the establishment," he finally stammered, his voice weak and reedy. It was a pathetic defense, and everyone at the table knew it. "The standards," I repeated, my voice dangerously soft. "You think condescension is our standard? You think making a guest feel unwelcome is our standard? You think insulting a man who has forgotten more about this industry than you will ever learn is our standard?" I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. "You are the one who doesn't belong here, Julian. You have fundamentally misunderstood what this place is about. It's not about expensive ingredients or fancy techniques. It's about generosity. It's about hospitality. It's about making every single person who walks through that door feel like they are the most important person in the world for the 2 hours they are with us. You failed. You failed in every conceivable way." I turned back to Sarah. Her face was pale, but her eyes were now hard as steel. She understood. She knew the gravity of the transgression. "Mr. Davies, I am profoundly sorry," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "This is an unacceptable failure of our core values. It will be handled." "It will be handled right now," I corrected her. I looked directly at Julian. His eyes were wide with panic. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him. The patrons at the nearby tables had started to notice the quiet drama unfolding, their conversations lowering to a murmur. "Julian," I said, and his head snapped towards me. "Earlier, I asked you what the most important rule at this restaurant was. You gave me the wrong answer. Now I'm going to ask you another question. What happens to an employee who breaks that rule in the most egregious way possible, in front of the owner?" He stared at me, his mouth agape. The word owner hung in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. His carefully constructed world of snobbery and elitism had just been demolished by a man in a button-down shirt and jeans. He looked from me to Arthur, the man he'd dismissed as a simple old rustic, and then back to me. The final, devastating pieces of the puzzle clicked into place in his mind. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He looked at Sarah, a desperate silent plea in his eyes. But Sarah's face was a mask of cold fury. There would be no help for him there. His fate was sealed, and he knew it. He turned his terrified gaze back to me, the owner he hadn't recognized, the man who held his entire professional life in his hands. "Well?" I prompted, my voice calm, but with the unyielding finality of a judge passing sentence. "Answer the question." Julian's face was a wreck of conflicting emotions, disbelief, panic, and the slow, dawning horror of irreversible consequence. He looked like a man who had just watched his own ship sink from a lifeboat he wasn't on. He opened and closed his mouth a few times, a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. The question hung between us, heavy and sharp. I don't know," he finally whispered, his voice cracking. The arrogance was gone, stripped away to reveal a scared young man who had just made the biggest mistake of his career. "Then let me tell you," I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. "You go to the locker room. You collect your personal effects. You leave your uniform, your name tag, and your keycard on Sarah's desk. You will be escorted from the premises, and your final paycheck will be mailed to you. You are fired, effective immediately." The words landed with the finality of a gavel strike. Julian staggered back a step as if I had physically hit him. "Fired?" he croaked, his eyes wide. You can't fire me. I'm the best waiter you have. My numbers are—" "I don't care if you can sell ice water in a blizzard," I cut him off, my patience gone. "Your numbers mean nothing to me. You violated the soul of this restaurant. You disrespected my guest, my mentor, and the very foundation this place was built on. There is no coming back from that." "Sarah," I said, turning to my general manager, "please ensure he is off the property in the next 10 minutes. Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "Of course, Mr. Davies." She turned to Julian, her voice now devoid of any warmth. "You heard him. Let's go." Julian looked at her, then back at me, a desperate last-ditch appeal in his eyes. But there was nothing there for him. He had burned the bridge, the ship, and the entire harbor. Defeated, he turned and walked away, Sarah following a step behind him, a silent executioner. He didn't glide this time. His shoulders were slumped, his perfect posture gone. He was just a man who had lost his job, his swagger replaced by a shame so profound it was almost visible. The moment they were gone, a heavy silence fell over our table. The nearby diners quickly averted their eyes, pretending to be engrossed in their own meals. I let out a long, slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The anger began to recede, leaving a hollow ache of disappointment in its place. I turned to Arthur. His face was etched with sorrow. "Mark, I didn't want that to happen," he said softly, his kind heart hurting even for the young man who had insulted him. "I know you didn't, Arthur, and I'm sorry it came to that. I'm sorry your evening was ruined." He reached across the table and placed his gnarled hand on mine. "My evening wasn't ruined, son. It's just a shame. He's just a kid who got lost in the glitter. He thought being in a fancy restaurant made him fancy. He forgot that the food is just an excuse to take care of people." He sighed. "I probably made a dozen mistakes like that when I was his age. His grace, his ability to find empathy even now, was a testament to the man he was. It was the very quality Julian had been unable to see. A few minutes later, a young waitress with a kind, nervous smile approached our table. It was Maria, one of my original hires from opening day. "Mr. Davies, Mr. Gable, Sarah asked me to take care of you for the rest of the evening. Can I get you anything? More wine? Dessert is on the house, of course." Her voice was gentle, respectful. She looked at Arthur with a genuine warmth that Julian could never have faked. "That would be lovely, Maria. Thank you," I said. Arthur ordered a simple slice of apple tart, the most rustic item on the menu. Maria smiled and returned moments later with 2 plates, one for each of us. She served Arthur first, placing the dish down carefully. "I hope you enjoy it, sir," she said. "Chef makes the crust with lard, the old-fashioned way. Says it's the only way to get it right." Arthur's eyes lit up for the first time since the ordeal began. He looked at her, a real, warm smile finally returning to his face. Does he now? A man after my own heart. As we ate our dessert, the tension finally dissipated. The warm glow of the restaurant returned. Arthur told me stories about his early days, about kitchen disasters and surprise health inspections. We laughed. The cloud that Julian had cast over our evening finally lifted, banished by a simple act of genuine kindness from Maria. When we were ready to leave, I walked Arthur to the door. As we stood on the sidewalk, the cool night air a welcome relief, he turned to me. "You've built something special here, Mark," he said, his eyes scanning the name Aria above the door. "It's not just the food or the decor, it's the heart. Don't ever let anyone, employee or customer, make you forget that." "I won't," I promised. "That rule is non-negotiable." He clapped me on the shoulder, his grip surprisingly strong. "Good. Now you should get back inside. Your house is full of people who need taking care of." I watched him get into his cab, a simple old man in a tweed jacket who held the soul of my restaurant in his history. I turned and walked back inside Aria. Maria was clearing a table nearby, and she caught my eye and smiled. The low hum of happy conversation filled the room. The kitchen door swung open, releasing a cloud of steam and the delicious smell of searing scallops. This was my dream, and Arthur was right. It wasn't about the performance, it was about the people. And tonight, I had made sure the rules of my house were crystal clear to everyone in it.